Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm John, and this is the KAA Kajukenbo Deep Dive. Welcome back. We are continuing our look into the life of Great Grandmaster Charles H. Gaylord. My guest today is Grandmaster Anthony Wade. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege.
Well, Grandmaster Wade is coming out of Stockton, California, as we were joking around, the home of the Stockton Slap. Now, now, Grandmaster, I first met you at Sifu Ron's place years ago.
hmm
You might not remember this. I remember one of our earliest conversations. We got into classic rock, and I specifically remember you singing a line from a song by Journey. And that's when I knew that I would like you. We would get along. But I don't know too much else about your history in the martial arts. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into Kaiji Kembo and your original instructor?
Yep, great question. So my original instructor was at the time was Sifu Pete Morales at Golden Dragon School of Karate in Newark, California. I started. I just wanted to continue getting in shape. I ran into Casey McPartland in a job interview of all things, and he was my boss's boss. He was like a senior director, and we got to talking, and he said he trained Kaji Kembo. I had never heard of it. I thought it was a bad rabbit dog or something. I didn't know, and I've always been athletic, and it was just something I wanted to continue getting, staying in shape. So at the end of the interview, I said, hey, if I get the job, I'd love to see what this, martial art is all about. And lo and behold, he actually hired me, and we became best friends. And that's how my Kaji Kembo journey began. Started in about 1986, I believe, 85, 86 in that time frame. And it was, like I said, with Sifu Pete Morales in Newark.
That's excellent. And how did you come to meet Grandmaster Gaylord?
So during my color belt days, the very first time I actually ran into Great Grandmaster Gaylord, Professor Gaylord at that time, I was a color belt, and Sifu Pete, he decided that he's going to have a guest instructor come down. I heard this name, Gaylord. Never knew the man's first name. Okay, at that time it was Professor Gaylord, and he came down, and they called the whole school, to attention, and turn around and salute the professor before you. And I'm sitting there, I'm looking at this man, I'm like, what did I get myself into? Because he just carried him. The way he carried himself was just larger than life, you know. And I remember when he got out there and he started teaching the class. The one thing he just drilled into us, besides his fist with that jade ring on it,
That's the ring
was
again.
exactly, was the basics. You got to have a firm grip, you have firm foundation on your basics. You don't have your basics down, nothing else will work. And that was the very first time that I actually met now Great Grandmaster Gaylord.
Hmm.
Yeah. And, as my training continued, I left and went and did my thing in Hawaii, and then came back and ranked up to brown belt and started going to these black belt workouts. And again, it was all about the basics. You gotta have your basics, and the power that the man, it just exuded, in his punches, in his blocks, in his strikes. Was just, I mean, to be honest with you, it was overwhelming. I mean, me as a young whippersnapper, I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, right. And then you throw a punch, and he throws a block, and you're just like, okay, so where did that happen? Where did that come from?
Yeah. So how would you describe him as a character, as a person? What was he like? You mentioned he's larger than life. What about more about him?
My interactions with him, he was always a down to earth kind of guy.
Mhm.
He was funny. He had that laugh that was just kind of infectious. And that big smile. He would
Yeah.
hit you with, and then when you're doing ki drills, he just get that big smile. He's like, and then he just hits you, and you just fly. It's just like, like they do in the movies. It's like, that type of deal. and, and it was just one of those things that at the time you really don't have a firm appreciation for it
Mm-hmm.
until you get later in years, and then you're like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
I was there. I met that man. The other day, I was looking at the Kajukenbo family tree, and yeah, I look at it from time to time. It's the same one, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
never changed. I mean, the one I have on the wall for the last 2 years. And I was looking at the Kajukenbo family tree, and I was looking at the Gaylord branch, and that Kajukenbo family tree represents all the minimum first degree black belts
Mm-hmm.
under Gaylord. But what you don't see is the thousands of color belts that came through Gaylord method.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think of it in those terms, his impact on Kajukenbo is just ginormous, absolutely huge.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, that's impressive. That's very impressive.
It is amazing to think about how many people have just come in for the training. I think we talk about how being given a black belt, that's an honor, but still there is this idea that the color of the belt doesn't matter. An
Right.
orange belt could still beat up a brown belt, in certain
Mm-hmm.
fights, depending what training they have. And you're right.
Right.
In fact, I was talking with Angelo Ferrer, another Kajukenbo guy in Japan, about how there's so many famous people in the UFC and MMA who've gone through Kajukenbo. They just never talk about
Mm-hmm.
it, actually.
Right. 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 It's funny because when you run, like you said, when you run into other martial artists, um, and they ask what style, you tell them, Kajukenbo Gaylord method, and their eyes just get as big. There's like, what? And they're like, how long have you been doing this? And I'm like, and it just amazes me at how well respected,
Mm-hmm.
Kajukenbo is in the martial arts community.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's just, another day in the park, but a lot of other styles, they're like, you guys are crazy. And it, it really didn't dawn on me until, I started prepping I only have two black belts. I've had my school for 11 years. I've only had two black belts. And I started prepping my first black belt for his test. And I'm laying out all the techniques, laying out all the pinion, punch art, grab arts that he's going to do, and so on and so forth. And it occurred to me, this came from this man,
Mm-hmm.
Gaylord.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I need to make sure that I represent him and I represent him well. One of my fondest memories of great Grandmaster Gaylord was my black belt test. I
Mm-hmm.
was very fortunate to have, I think probably about 10 or 15 black belts on my black belt panel. And great Grandmaster Gaylord. He was actually there, and I have it on videotape. And
Yeah.
normally, after the black belt test, each black belt, they go down and they critique you and tell you what you did wrong, tell you what you did right, and give their opinions and so on and so forth. So we got to that point, after what, 3.5, 4 hours. And I'm getting ready to hear it all the good, bad, and the ugly. I'm just worn out. And all of a sudden, he stands up, and he gives his spiel. He talks about how I did in the art and so on and so forth. And he says, I welcome you as a first degree black belt. And it dawned on me, he's like, hold on a second. So shouldn't my instructor be saying that? you know and then I had to step back. It's like, yeah, my instructor should be saying this, but it's this man's name on the art.
Yeah.
So if he says yes, then obviously my instructor has to say yes. So I guess it's a done deal.
It
you
counts.
know it was just, that to me was very humbling.
Mhm.
It was very, very humbling for me. And it's a moment that I will never forget. And like I said, I still have it. Back then we had VHS tapes. For those that don't know what VHS tapes are, you got to Google it. But I had to convert it to DVD. And I still watch that every once in a while as my reference point. So, yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's also one thing that's come up a lot with Grandmaster Gaylord. Is very down to earth, as you mentioned.
Hmm.
I could imagine somebody, if someone were to say, "Wait, Grandmaster Gaylord, you're not my instructor." I think my instructor should be saying this. I can imagine the look on his face and what he would say to you. He was very much. He would just be very happily say, This is me. This is my name on the shirt," like you said. And
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. So yeah, he had a indelible impression on Kajukenbo
mm-hmm.
and the direction that Kajukenbo's gone. And one of the wonderful things that he has always that I always heard from him and my instructor, Senior Grandmaster Pete, the late Senior Grandmaster Pete, is don't settle. Always go out and continue learning. You go out there, you learn something new, bring it back. You know, you always want to continue to expand your horizons and refine your techniques and just keep going, keep learning, keep growing. And that was one of the biggest lessons that I would have to say that both my instructor Senior Grandmaster Pete and great Grandmaster Gaylord always impressed upon us.
That's a theme. Quite a few people on this show have said that same thing. He's talking about go out, bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask what style did you bring back? Like I remember seeing you work some Eskrima at one point specifically.
Yes, sir.
What else? What
Yes,
else
sir.
have you brought back in yourself?
So when I moved to Stockton, I just wanted to continue training. I didn't want to, open a school or anything along those lines. I moved to Stockton in '05, and I found a FMA school, and I started training in Serrata. And a couple years after Serrata Eskrima, that is, and a couple years after training, a couple of friends of mine convinced me to start teaching, open a school.
Mm.
And so I was like, oh man, I really didn't want to do that. I just wanted to continue training, you know. And so I decided to go ahead and open the school. And between my full-time job and trying to run this school, I just wasn't able to continue training at my original school. And I found another guy, Grandmaster Art Mariflor, and I've been training with him for, good Lord, let me see. Uh, Oh, wow. I've been training with him since probably about 2010. That's a certificate right there.
There
That's
you go.
my
Okay.
master's certificate in Marirata Eskrima. So, and it's Serrata based with Dufando and a couple other styles blended into it as well.
Mm. Excellent. So how do you feel that worked with the Gaylord method of Kajukenbo? I've seen him. I remember Grandmaster Gaylord bringing in the Eskrima stick once in a while, club defense kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. As far as his philosophy and how he taught how to fight, how did that mix in?
Well, the interesting thing is, so my first experience with FMA was actually through a Kajukenbo instructor. Remember a few minutes ago, I said a color belt and I left and I came back. Well,
Mm-hmm.
during that time period, I had the opportunity to relocate to Hawaii
Mm-hmm.
for about 2 years. And I wanted to continue my training. And so I was recommended to go, seek out Agang Tony Ramos. He had just, retired and moved to the islands. And so I did. I went and I found him, and he was teaching in a community center way up on the North Shore. And so I get there thinking I'm going to continue training, Kajukenbo. And he sits me down. He says, "Brother, I don't teach Kajukenbo anymore. I need to teach
Mm-hmm.
12 pares, eskrima." It's like, okay, so me is like, okay, yeah, sure, fine. That's what you teach, and that's what I'm going to do. So I trained, 12 pares with him for about a year, and then I wound up relocating back to Fremont and continuing my training with Senior Grandmaster Pete Morales at the Golden Dragon School of Karate. And the interesting thing is with the sticks that Senior Grandmaster Pete introduced and Great Grandmaster Gaylord introduced, they were one or two techniques. They were basic techniques and some advanced techniques that were good and that worked, but it wasn't a complete full system,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak. So they weren't introducing a complete style,
Right.
okay, per se. And so by me training with Grandmaster Art, I was able to get the entire art, the entire style. Like I
All
said, I've
right.
been training with him for over 10 years now, and the style that I teach now is Serrata based, but I've also incorporated a lot of the kaju, a lot of, the other styles and things that I've picked up, over the 30 plus years, in my, travels and so on and so forth. Now, I really like Serrata Eskrima because it blends in with Kajukenbo very, very, very well. And the reason why I say that, if you think about Kajukenbo Gaylord method, our defense is very aggressive. Okay, we have very aggressive defensive techniques, and it is a defensive art. Okay, Serrata is the same way. Okay, the Mirabata Eskrima is the same way. It's in close, it's direct, it's quick. Take the person out, move on, go get your bonbons, and sit down and eat popcorn for the rest of the day.
Get the business done. All right.
Yes. Yeah. So, and that's the reason why, I just really gravitated towards it.
Excellent. Yeah, that's also what I've seen with Kung Fu here is I've found a couple guys who did the Northern Silampai Kung Fu, and I felt like we had sections of it that we took because that was what Gaylord wants us to work on. That's, this is the official stuff, but then you can kind of go out and it's interesting to see the other parts of the art, just to see what's out there. It's kind of like treasure hunting. You're looking for all this extra treasure that's out there.
Right. I distinctly remember you when we met at the Cellar School, the Slum Six and all those styles and so on and so forth. So it's that art, that style that you actually able to find out there in Japan.
I found a guy who did that. Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive.
I was surprised. Yeah, there was very few people who knew Kajukenbo out here. You mentioned how their eyes open up wide. One of my favorite things in Japan is like, oh, you know Kajukenbo? And he goes, yeah, you guys are like the bikers of the martial arts world.
Exactly.
But then, in that same group, I found this guy who did Northern Silampai. He did a bunch of stuff, and I was shocked. And we became drinking buddies that night, and are still in contact. He's a great guy.
Awesome.
Now, as we're almost finished for today, Grandmaster, if you could pass any message on to Grandmaster Gaylord now, what would you want to tell him?
The first thing I would do is I would thank him. I would thank him for being committed to the art and not allowing the knowledge that he gained and throughout the years to die with him. Okay, it takes commitment not only from the man himself but also from his family as well. Without him, we wouldn't have the huge Gaylord tree that we actually have, to this day. We wouldn't have had the influence in Kajukenbo the way we have. So myself personally, I would thank him, from the bottom of my heart for, staying with it, through the good times, to the bad times, to the ups and downs, the highs and lows, the lefts and rights, continuing to, pass on the art, because if it wasn't for him, Senior Grandmaster Pete wouldn't be there. Senior Grandmaster Pete wouldn't be there. I wouldn't be here. So from the bottom of my heart, I would say thank you.
All right. So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us, Grandmaster. Thank you, those of you at home. Stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, stay strong, stay Kajukenbo strong. Mahalo.
Thank you much. Appreciate it.